What's up, humans, and welcome back to the Human Music Podcast. This is episode 46, Dojo TV Producer Questions Volume 1. This week, we have another live episode from Dojo TV where we did nothing but take questions from the chat. We covered mixing, mastering, EQ basics, harshness, mud, defeating writer's block, how to get the most out of production lessons, and much, much more. If you want to watch live and hang with us in the chat next time, make sure to sign up for Dojo TV. It's totally free. Please remember to support our sponsors. These are all products we know and love, and the links are down below. First, Dojo TV, free producer live stream classes from the Producer Dojo Senseis like us. Next, the Dojo Max membership. You can get monthly private lessons, unlimited track feedback, and the weekly download archive from Ill Gates. It's the best value that Producer Dojo has to offer. Guest practices where you can learn from Seth Drake at the Approach Institute. He is the best engineer we know, and your first class is free. Finally, Gvngaroo Records music distribution, where you can get unlimited uploads for under $10. All my tracks come out on Gvngaroo, and yours can too. All right, humans, let's get into the episode.
Hello, people of Earth. This is Tesco with Rip Kenny and Trap Jesus, and you're listening to the Human Music Podcast. Woo!
Human Music Podcast. I like it. What's up, Dojo TV? How y'all doing? It's the Human Music Podcast.
Yes, it is.
My good friends, Tesco and Rip Kenny.
Hi, what's up? How's it going, peeps?
You love them.
What's Gucci? Big up, chat.
Yeah, so speaking of the chat, y'all are what today is all about. So I'm glad I'm seeing some good activity in there already. What's up, I'm going to say the archivist, but it kind of looks like the archivist. And either way, I'm into it.
Archivist?
Gus class. Hey, that's my friend Gus. What's up, Squeedot? Yeah, hey, Blue's in the house. Yeah.
Hey, Fish, the boy with the questions.
Hey, Fish.
Yes.
Hey, Blue, what's good, man?
Yes, dude, we got questions on lock. K-Fish is in the house.
Yeah, Chef Womp, what's good, buddy? Ooh, hello, Ego's around. Yeah, all right. We got a lot of good people. Yeah, so what's up, Dojo TV? Today is all about producer questions, specifically your producer questions. So if y'all don't got anything to ask, we don't got a show. That would be a problem. Luckily, we're in a whole producer nerd community, and we always have questions. Oh, Chef Wong coming out the gate with our first question. He asks, can we talk about harshness a bit? He went through his track quite a bit and need help with the methods of reducing. He did a bunch of soothing and EQing, but it's still slightly noticeable. And yeah, he's referring to a track he dropped in my track feedback section as part of the Dojo's unlimited track feedback feature, which, by the way, you guys should all definitely be a part of, because good God, that is my favorite part of the Dojo. And yeah, guys, let's talk about harshness.
Let's do it.
So important that Illgate dedicated an entire emergency session of the weekly download to it, way back on Cypher 8, the Jamaica Cypher, because everybody's songs were harsh as fuck.
That's a good memory, bro.
That is a good memory. You know,
one of those songs was my song. So I very clearly remember learning, oh, that is why that sounds like that. It's called harsh.
pain creates very distinct memories. Yes.
Yes, it does.
I think I'm a foremost expert on harshness because that's a hot take, but the music that I like to make is both overly distorted, like way too much distortion, plus you try to throw guitars in there, then with too much distortion, that's not a good combo for a smooth sounding mix. So I'll tell you the secrets that I have found to be helpful. Number one, start with an EQ to cut the resonances. Number 2, if you have soothe, use that. And then number 3, return back to your processing if those two do not fix it. So I'll dive into a little bit of each of those. First, if you have soothe, like the harshness debate or like topic nowadays would be remiss without mentioning soothe, because it is a really, really useful plugin. Although it is one of those blanket fixes that becomes just the go-to, throw soothe on it and then move on. Well, it might not always be the best solution. The reason you're here is that you want to learn the best and most efficient ways to make your music sound as good as possible. And that's not a one-stop shop for one tool every time. Yes, there is a hammer and nail GIF in the chat. Not every problem needs fixing with a hammer. Although, what's the saying? Something about hammers and nails. If your only tool is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. Thank you. I would have butchered the shit out of that. Hey, chat. So starting with your EQ, Pro Q is a great example of being able to look at the waveform and see where the peaks are. But even that, you would be basically doing yourself a disservice just to go in there and look at where the peak is and then notch that out, because that's not necessarily where the resonance is. What you got to do, as described in the weekly download, watch that one on harshness for further reference if this still isn't quite enough. But take a resonant peak and sweep it through that harsh area from, maybe 1,000 to 2,000 hertz up to 7,000 hertz, giving yourself a little buffer on either side of the 2 to 5 standard range. Where essentially, when I'm sweeping through, I'm looking for the frequency that, when narrow boosted, makes me wince the most. If it almost tries to trigger your tear ducts, then stop there. You don't need to go any further. That is literally the frequency that you need to cut. So start by taking a Q of 8 to 12, boosting that up 12 dB and sweeping that through and finding those frequencies that really make you go, and then cutting those, maybe 3, maybe 6 dBs, whatever you can find that is really where it needs to be cut. Then use a little bit of soothe to get all of the other kind of random peaks that might move around in the sound if you have it. If not, you're just going to have to do step 1 multiple times to find all those little frequencies. I worked for a long time without soothe, and you can do it. It just takes a little bit more time. Then you use soothe. When you're using soothe, don't just slap on the default preset and call it good. Actually use the band listen, use the delta mode to find those specific points that need addressing and boost those up, and low pass and high pass the other stuff out of it. You don't need to take all the 10,000 hertz out of a sound that isn't harsh up there. Same thing with down low. If you're cutting all the resonances down low in some sort of nice wubby sound, you might take the fun out of the sound. So when you're using soothe, make sure that you're only using it on the frequencies that you need to be. And then if both of those have just completely killed the sound and it's no longer enjoyable, then you need to return to those steps and do them less. Or if you do those steps less and the sound still hurts, you need to return to your processing. For me, normally it's too much distortion, or I need to use a pre-distortion filter that cuts out some of those harsh frequencies before distortion adds those harmonics back in. But that's really the 3 steps that I've found to be beneficial on harshness. It is one of the most important things to this date that I still do rigorous checks for in my music. And I'm really glad that we started with that one, because that is a hugely important topic for making music that translates to a bunch of different systems.
Yes, that is actually, one of the things I said to Ethan, to Chef Womp, and in the, that track feedback was that really dial this in, because, if I'm listening to Spotify, and the track has a bunch of harshness in it, that is the first thing that will make me cut a song. You know, a lot of stuff like, oh, I don't know if this is what I dig, but I'll keep listening to it to see if I dig it. But if it's harsh, it's like, even if I like this song, this just hurts my ears. I've got to mix a track later. So nope, no thank you.
Yeah, you're right. It's a dead giveaway of an amateur production. And I noticed the chat's talking about how much Soothe costs. Black Friday, and then they also have a spring sale. Ook Sound, the company that makes Soothe, I've seen it for $99. That's when I picked it up.
Yeah, me too.
Also, their program Spiff, if they have it on sale, grab that as well. It's like Soothe, but for transient shaping. It's basically like band specific boosting or cutting of transients. So say you had like an acoustic guitar that needed more finger picking, that would be the perfect solution. Or you have another element that has like a really dynamic high end transient that needs to be tamed. Or honestly, I don't know why I'm talking about Spiff right now. The question was about harshness, but important. Spiff is great because you're going to wait till this sale to buy Soothe. So I might as well talk about this right now to see if you want it. If I want my kick to have just more like 5K click in the transient, like a lot of the time Spiff will sound better to make that like beater sound on a kick or a snare hit like a lot harder than just boosting up that 5K frequency, because you're going to get a more dynamic response to that oomph that you're looking for. So if you wait for that sale, consider that one. It's beneficial as well, but at least if you're making distorted bass music, pick up Soothe.
I got a couple of more things on harshness here. One, when you're looking for harshness, just like when you're looking, kind of sibilants are, a classic form of harshness that come out when you hit those S and T sounds. And on every de-esser that I've ever used, there's like either a listen mode or audition mode, where you press that button and you dial in to find, that way you're listening to only what the plugin is taking out, which is very important. You want to listen and find that it's like doing that, that bell sweep to find the frequency, except more extreme, because it's really, like a band pass filter that's only allowing that harsh frequency through, and you really nail that in and then switch it off. On Soothe, that mode is called Delta. It's down at the bottom, so you can click that Delta, and then you're only hearing what Soothe is taking out. Another thing that I learned recently, and vocals are a place where harshness is A, very prevalent, and B, very obvious, because vocals are usually right at the front of your mix. One thing I learned is that rolling off your lows too steep will actually really accentuate the harshness of the vocal, because you're taking away too much of the low end too fast. And, having a lot of high end information is good. It's just that it's unbalanced from the rest of the track, like that low mid information that's so important to the body of a vocal. So making sure that you're not taking away too much of your low end, just like Rip Kenny was saying, with not soothing out those low registers in a sound where those low registers are vital. So make sure everything with EQ has to do with balance, and that's harshness for sure. Do you have any thing you want to talk about harshness, Tesco, before we move on to the next question, which is related about mud?
Yeah. Two things I just want to briefly talk about. That aren't necessarily like EQ or processing, but stuff that's equally as important, I think, that needs to get considered is like, if you're sound designing, for example, like really just making sure your LFOs and knobs and all that are dialed into very precise values, because some are going to generate more like white noisy, like really rough kind of sounding textures. So just realizing like, 46 versus 48 on the FM knob makes a huge difference in the quality of the high end that's generated and how much. And especially if you're making like loud, distorted music, that's going to get more emphasized as you try to like push for loudness and stuff. So be very particular with that. And then the other thing I was going to say too is like, people are pretty conscious about removing lows out and making room for the kick and sub. And I feel like not the same amount of thought is put into the high end. And it's like the extreme high and low end are directly correlated to how present a sound feels. Like that sub range and that like 15K plus kind of high end. I'm not talking about like 5K, right? But at like 15K, there's no definition there really. It's not like you could play a melody in 15K. It just is bright and airy and open sounding. And so if you have too much of this bright, airy openness on all of your other elements and you're not making a choice to consciously contain the high end on other stuff, then, you know, you're going to be getting a bit of this airy brightness all over the place, and it's not going to sound that great. So one thing I'd say is if it's an element that you're taking out low end on to make room for your sub, and besides like the drop basses and stuff, sorry, I think my Discord's gone off here, but I'd say, you know, just go to your other sounds as well, and you know, take out some of those highs. Like what really got me into doing this was seeing hip hop producers work with samples and seeing how the samples were like steeply rolled off in the high end and the low end. And then I realized like, oh, this is what makes so much room for the drums and the vocals that come on top. So I started taking that same approach with, you know, more background kind of elements. I usually use a high and low cut on them and like pull that into taste. So yeah, hopefully that helps. Be selective with your extreme high end.
Yeah.
Watch our YouTube. You'll remember the mix cube that Evan drew.
Yes, the cube.
Back end does not need those highs and lows. The stuff that's supposed to be further back there, roll off those highs and lows and it automatically pushes itself back.
See, that's why you need to subscribe on YouTube, because you need the cube in your life. One final note.
Subscribe on the tube for the cube.
Couldn't have said it better myself. The final note that I wanted to make was also think about where you're cutting this harshness in relation to your compression on that track, because you know, you're probably going to want to cut that harshness before you compress really hard, because that's going to bring out all of these frequencies. And if you cut and then compress again to bring everything back to normal, it's going to sound like you cut less of the stuff that you want out of it. And also, especially if you're using something like OTT, that brings out all of the definition of these things, including the nasty stuff. So you might need to cut this frequency before you hit the OTT, and then maybe again a little bit afterwards, because it's going to bring it out even more. And so figuring that balance of where you cut the harshness, where the compression in your chain sits, and then figuring out like the balance of before and after, or if it's all before, if it's all after, and taking the time to figure out what the most efficient process for that is. So yeah.
Anybody who's been watching the Seth Drake courses knows that he's really big on serial processing, meaning using multiple instances of the same type of plugin on a chain in specific orders. Like he might put the compressor on there first in the timeline of when he's putting things on, and compress it and hear what it brings out, and then put the EQ before it in the actual order of the chain, of the gain staging, and be like, okay, now before that, so leading into the compressor, let me EQ out all of the things that the compressor is bringing out. Similar to his method of turning up the entire track to intentionally, temporarily clip the master bus. So he calls it, checking it in the red. So you make it clip and hit the red, and then you hear what jumps out at you as being bad. Is it, big boomy frequencies, muddy frequencies, harsh frequencies? What's coming out when you hit that ceiling, when you hit that compression, because compression will show you the flaws in your mix quicker than anything else.
Amen to that. On that note, with Mudiness, how do you guys feel about that?
I don't like it. I don't like it at all.
I am anti-muddiness in music.
Amen.
Clarity is much better. But yeah, so for anybody that doesn't know, the muddy area of a mix is generally in the low mids. You know, it's above the sub bass, but, you know, in the lower range of the actual, like, you know, melodic mid-range section. So say anywhere from, I don't know, 100, 150 up to say 500-ish, depending. And there's overlap between the arbitrary adjectives we put on top of what we're hearing. You know, some of the higher end of that could be boxiness, some of the lower end of that could be boominess, but don't get too caught up on the exact crossover frequencies where one adjective leads to another, because they're just approximations to help people understand what we're hearing. What it is that kind of that kind of stuff that goes on and can really build up in a mix, especially the, you know, between like the top end of the kick and the sub and the bottom end of the vocals and the instruments and the leads. Like that area right there is where both of those cross over. One, it is not the most pleasant, you know, set of frequencies in general. Some don't want to cut it all out because some instruments really need it. Like toms, for example, often really shine in that like 200 something range. So you don't want to just, you know, unilaterally cut every single frequency, every single element at 200. That's not the move. But listen for where each individual sound is muddy and what each individual sound does not need to help your track. You know, if you've got a strong sub and a strong kick in this section, most of your other instruments don't need anything anywhere down near that. And so the more you can cut out of what you don't need, the more room there is there for the couple of elements where it does help. And also on like big systems, the crossover frequency between, you know, the main speakers and the subs is down there in that muddy range. So if you've got too much mud in your track, not only does your track sound less clear and more muddy, it's going to be exacerbated when you put it on a big system because both the low end and the mid range speakers are going to be reproducing it.
Yeah, that's a really good point with the live rig setup. It's hugely important. It's dead giveaway of an unpolished track when all of a sudden you just hear that on the live rig. It's very noticeable. And you also bring up a really good point about mud, and that's being selective on what you cut out. Quick tangent. Hilarious GIF in the chat right now of some dude falling into the mud. If y'all aren't in the Discord chat right now, you need to head on over there, get yourself in that Dojo TV live chat where you can ask questions and get involved because it's good stuff. Big up, chat. Anyways.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. Thanks, Nomadic. I appreciate you for putting that in there. I've been staring at that as right above my camera.
It's hard not to giggle on camera looking at that shit. But you need to be selective on what you cut the mud out of, because back when I was, you know, maybe a year or two into producing, when I thought I could just math and engineering my way into a good sounding mix without using my ears, I would, you know, listen to little YouTube clips on how to make better mixes, and everyone would be like, cut the low end of everything that doesn't need it. And then boxiness happens at 400 hertz, so cut 400 hertz. And, you know, mud can happen between 150 and 200 hertz. And in most mixes, you don't need that at all. So then I was like, oh, cool. I don't want mud in my track. I don't want to be like the guy falling in the mud. That looks terrible. That looks god awful. I'm just going to cut that out of everything. And all of a sudden I get to the end and I'm like, wait, why does my mix sound lifeless and powerless and like it's missing the like meat? It's missing the meat. It has no substance. It's because exactly. If you go vegan, you still need to find a way to get protein in your diet. Just the same, don't cut out all of the 150 to 200 hertz or all of the 400 hertz. That's not the solution. You need to figure out what elements A, don't need it, or B, have just a little bit too much. And some elements might need more of it. Like you said, toms. Sometimes you need to boost 200 hertz on toms to get the thud that you need to make that fill really happen. So it's all about being intentional with that. Just like Tesco was talking about with the high end, you got to be intentional with the elements that have 10K plus. Not every element can have a whole bunch of 10K plus if you're going to have definition on the stuff that matters. Same thing with the mud. That main bass can't have no 400 hertz because it's going to sound ridiculous and thin, and like you're going to make more harshness problems for yourself, because after you compress with taking out all of the 400 hertz, it's going to feel thin and boxy. So just be really intentional on what you're pulling it out of, and reference and make sure that when you do pull it out, it's because you were noticing that it had too much of that gargly low throat noise that Luke so properly described. Because exactly. And just be intentional with it. Don't be like me when I was a novice, just cutting it out of everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the mud isn't that it's at any given frequency. It's that it's a frequency in this sound that is not helpful. Like, if you're looking at a spectrum EQ and you're seeing the visualization of what this, EQ curve looks like, you'll notice there's like a big spike, usually at the lowest, at one of the lower frequencies. That is your fundamental frequency. In a lot of cases, you will not want to cut that fundamental frequency. Go back to toms. That big boom, like that low hit of the tom, is something you want to keep. But often, maybe like right above that or right below that, there will be some residual frequencies that are much quieter looking on the screen. And you might want to try cutting some of those. But again, it always goes back to your ear. Make the bell, do the search and destroy method, sweep back and forth and listen. When I turn this up, did that make this sound like pop more and more desirable? If so, do not cut that frequency. Did it make that element of the track more or less defined, more muddy, nastier? Did you hear a bunch of like noise and kind of like a weird confluence of multiple frequencies that isn't pleasant? That's a great frequency to cut, whether that's up in the top end being harshness, whether that's, in the mid range and a kind of honky or boxy kind of frequency, or whether it's down in the low mids as mud. If you hear it and it makes your sound in the mix sound worse than it did before you boosted that, that's a great candidate for cutting. And just like leveling, make it too quiet and then bring it back up and then bring it back down, and find that sweet spot where you don't necessarily, we're not talking about using notch filters that 100% take out every bit of the sound. We're talking about dipping it. Does it need 2 less decibels? Does that sound right? Does it need 8 less decibels? Does it need 12 less decibels? You won't know until you experiment. And the more you do this experiment, the more your ear is going to get trained, and the quicker you'll be at A, finding the frequencies, and B, getting them to a good level.
Yeah, absolutely. You make a really good point with like with mixing, like going, like, is it too loud? Is it too quiet? Like A/B it. Make the dip that you think is right, and then turn on and off that bell, and see, when you turn that bell on and it cuts, does it feel like the song lost its power in that element? You might have done too much. Is it still feeling muddy? You might not have done enough. But being able to have the presence of mind to A/B it, to check, did I do enough? Did I not do enough? Instead of just, I think there's some mud here, cut it, move on. You might have cut not the right amount. So A/B it, make sure that you're taking the time to get it right, and don't just do it arbitrarily.
Amen. Chef Womp, who is apparently was a chef before
you would expect, right? You would hope.
Restaurant industry says, and pardon me while I butcher this French, there's a term called mise en place that directly translates to everything in its place. I always think of that when mixing. Everything has its own specific space. You just need to determine where that space is and organize accordingly. Amen. It's not like you don't need salt. You just need to not oversalt or undersalt. It's about finding the right amount of salt to bring out the flavors in this particular dish. How how big is the dish? You know, how bland is the dish and are the ingredients before you get to the salting stage? Like these all have a lot to do with how much salt you need. Same with EQ. You know, it's really a case by case basis. There's no cookie cutter formula. There is listening with your ears and making decisions. And also don't take too long on the decisions, because the longer you sit on one element and second guess yourself about how much 240 you need to pull out of this kick, the less objective you're going to be about it. I saw a great video from like Kush, you know, what's that YouTube channel, like mixing?
Yeah, dude with the long hair, Kush. Yeah.
Great
He's
channel.
awesome.
I recently saw a video over there called, you know, it was about shaving the mix. And he's basically saying like his mentor taught him like, yo, stop spending so much time on any one element. And he's basically to the point where now he won't spend more than a minute per element at a time. He might come back later and shave that kick a little bit more, but he hears the kick and he's like, I think it's got too much low mids in this kick. I think it's about here. I think it needs about this much of a dip. Check. Sure. Moving on. Now let me see what the bass is doing. Now let me see what the piano is doing. Let me move around the mix and make different adjustments quickly, and then sit back and listen to the mix as a whole and make some more notes. Ooh, I think I need to shave a little more out of the kick.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
The kick, you know, like something.
Amen to that. Yeah, it's that balancing act of like massaging everything into place. But I really like that sort of way of describing it. I think that's a good way to get that point across, and something that like I think you guys can agree, but it's kind of weird at this point. Not weird, but like so far removed from the way I go about doing things that there is never really like this defined mix process. It's always like mix as you go type thing, so that you can anticipate like how much space you're using, what's the finished track going to sound like approximately, and like just minimize those kind of like you know, gaps in translation when it comes to like how you think it's going to sound versus how it does. And yeah, in that Kush audio. Oh, actually, before I get to that, I'm going to drop a video here in the chat by Ahi. I've recommended this before. It's called Best Mixing Advice I Ever Received. He talks about using Voxengo's span. And you'll notice on all the references he pulls in, if you use a tool like this, that a lot of tracks have a dip in that lower mids kind of area to avoid muddiness. And having that sort of dip down in that like 200-ish range gives you more separation between the sub and everything on top. So I found visually that just made things click for me. So I'd suggest checking out that video. But on the topic of that Kush audio channel, he has a concept in there which he articulated really well, which is something that isn't talked about enough. So when we talk about mix balance, what we mean is a sort of unbalanced balance where some things are prioritized more than others. Like not everything is perfectly in balance, much like how in a movie, not all of the characters are the most important. You have the main character, some random background person for one scene, and then every other character in between. And it's sort of the same with all the elements in the song. It's like some elements are the main character and they're going to get all the screen time, and other elements are just there to sort of fill out that main character. So if you're finding your stuff's getting too harsh or too muddy, you might be trying to give too much in those regions with too many elements. And instead, I suggest finding one element that's strongest in either both or each of those and use that as the anchor for your entire mix. So have that element taking up the majority of the space in those areas and mix in everything else around that. And then you shouldn't run into this issue of getting too many elements contributing competing frequencies in the harshness or muddiness area. If that doesn't make sense, let me know. But hopefully that clicks. Like unbalanced balance is what you're going for. push some things very forward, and then everything else should be balanced like in the background.
Yeah. I have one spice of caveat on that span video, and that's if I was a novice producer watching that video, I would throw span on my master channel, and if it didn't have that dip, I would start cutting it out of stuff. Not all the references are going to look exactly like that. Like maybe it will sonically sound similar to that, and the curve isn't going to look exactly like that span reference that you thought it should. So just make sure you're not watching that video and blindly applying it, because it's something I would have done when I was a novice and screwed up my mixes. I used to take an imager on my master and be like, oh wow, there's not enough 400 to 1000 hertz, and on my main sound take and build up like a weird shelf thing with 3 different peaks and make like a 6 dB boost from 400 to 1000, because my master imager needed to show me the curve that I needed to see, or else the song wasn't good and mixed right. And all I did was make a bunch of problems for myself. So just a little caveat. Just
no matter what Dad just said, yeah, he did exactly what you're talking about video for the first time.
We've all been there, brother.
You know, it's one of those things, though, like, this is something every producer goes through, so don't feel bad if this is you, because you learn a rule and then you apply it everywhere. And then you got to learn that, like, you know, where the jurisdictions of that rule are, like how far to actually push it, when to use it, when to ignore it, when to, you know, when to go hard, when to go soft. Like it's a subtle art, mixing. There are rules, but it's like, you know, everyone's a different puzzle. It's got a completely different set of audio in every track. You know, you're starting with a different set of problems, and because of that, it's going to have a different set of solutions for it. Whereas, on the other hand, like process, having an idea of what direction you head through a mix and what order you solve problems in can be a much more linear process. Like that's what Seth Drake teaches. It's like he likes to start with the kick, and with the reference, find that kick, make sure that kick is working. And then he connects dots, you know, next he'll make sure his snare is working with the kick. And then he'll like make sure the hi-hats are working with the snare. And then he's got like a drum kit. And now we can start relating things, tying things to the drum kit, what needs to be quieter or louder than any given element. And having a process, an order of operations that you repeat can be so helpful. But having tools that you blindly apply every time can be very detrimental. Yeah. It's all about the ears.
I remember hearing something about some like famous mix engineer was like, a good mix is comprised of 1,000 informed decisions along the way, like things that you listened to and heard and did a little bit. You can ruin a mix by doing one thing, but you can't make a great mix by doing one thing. So don't overdo any of these techniques. Just true sausage fattener. No mixing, no EQs, no compressor, just sausage fattener on the master at 100% color while you're at it. And yeah, you might as well hit it with the octagon, just all eight OTTs, and just keep it rolling.
Man, so on that note, K Fish asked earlier about mastering and was asking you, Evan, on well, he was asking in general, do we send our stuff out to get mastered? And he was saying he knows that you do your mastering. You want to talk a bit about why, the pros and cons of both, and sort of you know, I'd love to hear sort of what you look for when you're trying to finalize a master. What kind of metrics are you looking at? What kind of goals you're trying to hit?
Absolutely. So the reason that I like to master my own stuff nowadays, it's a few different reasons, but the first being, I'm not a perfect mix engineer. I don't think anyone besides the cream of the crop, maybe Seth Drake, God tier people, could say that they're approach. You know what? Actually, I don't even think Seth Drake would say he's a perfect mix engineer. No one is a perfect mix engineer. So you mastering your own track allows you to get as far as you think you can in the mix, and then give it a little rest, couple days, let your ears reset, then master it, and then undoubtedly you'll hear things that you need to fix still. And if you've paid $50 for someone to master it, you're going to have to continue paying them to fix those little things. And for myself, who's found that I value now a consistent release schedule over just about anything, that I need that. I need to be able to go in and master it and then go back and fix those. It's oftentimes finish a mix, master it, and then there's 10 more versions of bounces after that. No joke, maybe 20 of like snares a dB too loud. The vocal had just a little bit of harshness. And it's those final tweaks that you can eventually get to the end and be like, I hear nothing else that I need to fix. And that's when you can call it done. Yeah, that's when you've lost your mind and also can call it done. But if you sent it to mastering, you hear this little thing that is just killing you, but you already paid the money to have it mastered, and then you release it like that, you're going to listen to that track for the rest of perpetuity and hear that one little thing you wish you could have fixed, and then have to live with it. So for me, who, you know, doesn't want to have to deal with that, even though if I had the mix perfect and sent it to a really good mastering engineer, it would probably end up a little better, because a second set of ears always does. It allows me to take that process, put it on my own timeline, make all those little tweaks that you're undoubtedly going to have to make, and then be able to get it to a final point where I'm like, I don't hear anything else I need to fix, and call it done. The second point, well, actually the second point was that it's on my own timeline. So that's all wrapped into the same point that I just said. But really, when I'm mastering my own work, it's mostly about bringing the depth and the loudness and the overall like saturation of the track to a point where I deem it finished, right? So really the main things that I'm doing in my master chain that I deem matter are multi-band compression to bring all the levels just a little bit closer together, multi-band saturation, listening to each band, mid and side. If you have Ozone, this is the perfect tool for it. Listen to each band in the mid and listen to each band in the side. Push it as far as you can before it starts to blow out, and then bring it back so that you've pushed each band as far as it makes sense to push. And therefore, you know the harmonic sonics of your song. That is that a thing? Harmonic sonics? It sounds good. Sounds tight. The harmonic, we should start like a super new wave indie color bass band called whatever I just said.
Harmonic Sonics.
Yeah, I already forgot it. It's not as good of a name as we thought.
It's not that good. It's cheesy, actually. But the harmonic sonics, that way you know that they're maximized, right? So then after that, I use 2 stages of limiting, one to just clip the peaks off the top, and then one to get it loud. And then I'm looking for an RMS in the ballpark of the references that I'm using, normally on metric AB. That's like, or not metric AB, on waves, WLM, whatever. It's like between -4 and -6 LUFS. I know that is like aggressively loud, but when you make bass music, it should be aggressively loud. And if it's in that range, I know it's going to hit on Spotify, and it's going to be relatively comparable on SoundCloud. And so those are really the things that I'm looking for, and the why I master my own stuff at this point. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I just want to tie it into something I said earlier about Seth Drake pushing stuff into the red. That's exactly it. You master your own stuff. You are going to bring out the imbalances in your own mix. Thank God, because even if you plan on having somebody else master it, figure out a basic mastering chain for yourself and run every mix version through it so that you can take notes on, oh, this problem will definitely come up when it gets limited. Oh yeah, the muddiness jumped out. That snare makes my ears bleed. Whatever. You will find things that you didn't think were a problem before compression that are clearly a problem after it. And then you can fix them before you pay somebody else to master it if you're still going to pay a professional to master it, which is not a bad idea, especially if you're not sure you know what you're doing and this is an important release for you.
Yeah. And full caveat, when I was still at the point where I wasn't super comfortable with my mastering prowess, I would do exactly that, do my own master chain, get it as good as I could, and then bounce it. And the end result ended up better than I probably could have done at the time. But if you're to the point where you're comfortable with your mastering tools, you've watched the Seth Drake approach, and you have gotten some good tutelage on mastering and how to use those tools, and you're comfortable with doing it, you are able, because the final mix, final V6, final, God damn it, final, usually doesn't end up being the final.
And I just hate my mixes now. That started killing my confidence. So I was just like, oh, this one, what's it today? The 23rd of February. All right. Mix 2-23.
Yeah.
And now I just know when I bounced it. So I can look, I can forgive myself for being a bad engineer. That was weeks ago.
Yeah, I don't want to realize how long it's taken me to get through all the different steps. So I just go version 6.2. And then if it's the first time I master it, like 6.2 master 01 in brackets. And then after that, it's just 6.3, 6.4 until it's done. And then when it's done, then I move that into a separate folder with the final masters and just title the track, and I'm done. But I
master every mix in the same mixing session. So it's just I just kick them all out with the date. I used to have like, got my mixing session over here and my mastering session over there, and I would bounce my entire mix out, and then I'll bring it into the mastering session, find out I had 1,000 problems, have to take notes, go back. It just took so long. And then I actually changed out some plugins that I found out were eating up a ton of CPU, and got a better laptop. And those two things allowed me to jam all of those plugins into one session, which still, depending on the session, can sometimes get a little bit hefty.
So to answer K-Fish, good follow-up question. Do I make one master for everything, or do I make separate masters for Spotify and the like that are going to loudness match everything down? I only make one master. And I know that this is a debated topic that you could definitely go either way on. The reason that I only make one master is because for bass music, the compression and heavy limiting that gets you the loud luffs is just kind of part of the sound. So if you're listening on Spotify to a dubstep track that has a bunch of dynamics that was mastered at minus 12 luffs, and it's sitting next to other tracks with minus 12 luffs, like the main bass is going to sound quieter than the others. It just is, because it was not limited as heavily, and everything else, just the sonics change. The supersonics change when you go from minus, Seattle shout out there, good old supersonics. When you go from minus 4 luffs to minus 12 luffs, it sounds very different. It just does. And so A, because it's simpler, and B, just to kind of be in line with the rest of the tracks that you're listening to alongside these other ones, I prefer to have just one master that is in line with the current sound, right? If you're making other genres, ambient music, or like hi-fi techno stuff, or there are use cases where it makes sense to do two different masters. Classical music, shout out any classical music composers in the chat. Big up chat. Keep them questions coming. But yeah, I only make one master. That's why.
Yeah, me too. I mean, especially for bass music, I've definitely, tried, I've given clients who were doing, chiller genres like some R&B or some, like hip hop that wasn't super in your face. The -13 LUFS and then the -9 or 8 LUFS version. So, hey, put this one on your SoundCloud, send this one to Spotify. And, that sounded really good. That worked. But again, we're not talking about dubstep. We're not talking about hybrid trap. We're not talking about glitch hop. The dynamics, they're like, oh, you want to keep the dynamics. But in dubstep, the dynamics are between the build up and the drop. And you've got to kind of bake that in, like make those build up sounds quieter. Use the drop rack. It helps, but once you hit that drop, it needs to be super in your face the whole time. And the way that drops are composed make that dynamic question come out different. It's with all the checkerboarding that we teach, like where you literally just got your sub riding underneath and your one lead sound sitting on top of it at any one time, basically making one sound happening. And then the kick and the snare come in and sidechain the absolute hell out of those things and cut them down to nothing so that you're only listening to the kick or the snare. And it's like, you don't have to have these dynamics to let all the subtleties of the background of the music cut through, because if you've composed it right, there aren't any. And, if you do have some subtle dynamic things way back there, they're only showing up in the holes anyways. They're getting in, and you should probably be checkerboarding those out too, because you don't need them in those spots.
Amen. Yeah, I'm echoing all that. I think that's solid. Depends on the type of music. I mean, I hate to say it depends, but
it does. It just does.
That's the theme of the episode, though. Like, oh, should you cut out 200? Depends.
Man, unless there's anything you guys want to add to that, Gus had an awesome question here, I think.
What's up, Gus?
Gus is asking, if you had a lesson with your top/favorite producer, how would you make the most of it? And what topics or focus have made the best use of time in the lessons that you've led or had?
Ooh, that's a good question.
If y'all want to take some time to think about that, I got an answer.
So you go first.
Man, so in the sessions I've taken, I've either gone in with a very specific thing I've wanted to learn, and I've taken a session with somebody because I've been intrigued by their sound designer. I think they process their vocals great or whatever, and I've gone sessions where I've just gone in. But if it's just kind of like an opportunity I come by and, I see that tweet or that Instagram post or whatever that so-and-so is giving a session, and I'm just like, fuck it, I'm gonna hop on it. Typically, I just end up asking them, like, what's been like a latest discovery you've had, or what's been exciting you lately within your own production journey, right? Like maybe they figured out a technique in the last couple months that they've been running with, or something that they like to do in their DAW that you wouldn't have even thought to ask. And so I just like to ask people, like, what's your favorite thing to do when you're, in your DAW producing? And I've learned a ton of cool shit from that.
Yeah, open-ended questions so you can learn what you don't know that you don't know.
Yeah, like I feel and depending on sort of where you're at with things, like I think it's totally fair to just be like, I'm paying you this much money and I'm just gonna berate your ass with questions and just like straight up barrage. And that's cool too, but I tend to just see it as like, all right, this person's busy. They seem chill. They know some stuff I want to figure out. And I can't expect them to set aside some time for me. So let me just make sure they got, food on their table or roof over their head or whatever. I'm going to slide them some money. Let's just sit down and just chat. And I try and keep it as open-ended and relaxed and conversational as possible, as if I was catching up with a friend. because, obviously they're people too. And depending on how you approach that session, they might, they might like categorize you differently or think that you're at a different place where you're at. But like I said, if I'm not having a session where I'm going in with a very clear intent, I'll just leave it casual and open, because I feel like getting them out of like teacher mode is going to like get them in that flow and get them to like spark conversation on whatever excites them and not what I told them I want to learn. Hopefully that makes sense.
That's it.
Usually when people get talking, like I just interrupted you, they just fucking keep going.
Why not? I was gonna say you make a really good point. Like, don't like let them explain the thing. I'm like, when you're asking someone a question, especially someone that you like look up to or know that they have superior knowledge, like the tendency is to like over explain the question to the point where you kind of take avenues for their answer out of it, and B, try to insert your level of knowledge into the conversation so that they feel like you're an equal partner. That's not what it's about. That's not why you're there. Ask a question that is simple, that they can elaborate on, and don't try to insert your ideas or, oh yeah, I know that. Like that kind of like you want them to be in a point where they're over explaining and stream of consciousness talking to where they will explain things that are, might not have even crystallized to them at the point, because they have such a breadth of knowledge in this thing, obviously, because you're looking up to them. Or in the case of like my favorite artist that I'm asking, like I want them to talk unfiltered, because there's going to be some nuggets in there that I would never have even thought if they start rambling. And it's important to let them have that space to ramble in that case. And also like say I was talking to Nero, like I had a 1 hour session with Nero. If I had a 1 hour, regardless, I wouldn't be asking them about multiband compression. I would be asking them about their songwriting process and how intentional the pop simplicity, but retaining the dark sensibilities of their songwriting is, right? Like asking them the things that only they could answer, right? Or in the Nero case, like how do you create like such a cohesive melodic feel to your music from song? Like you can hear a Nero song and know it's Nero, not from necessarily the sound design, although that is part of it, not necessarily the vocals, although that is part of it. Like I would say that Nero has like a consistent melodic element to like the sensibility of the emotion that those chords and melodies possess is theirs and theirs alone. And so like those are the kinds of things that you would want to prod and try to figure out. But I'd say like the biggest thing is the thing that you touched on and that I hammered home, which is let them elaborate on their answers, because you're going to get much better information that way than trying to insert any sensibility or maybe ego driven, trying to prove yourself in the eyes of this idol type thing. It's just not going to serve you.
Amen.
Yeah.
I like that you said, don't be like, I know that. Cause I definitely feel that, and may have done that in the past too. I'm not like,
it's only natural. It's only natural.
Right. Cause you want to be like, no, let's get to the good shit. But like, it really kills the kind of underlying like vibe and the person trying to explain it. Like you can let them go on for a bit, and if they're talking about like harmony and you wanted to go into sound design, you could be like, oh yeah, by the way, like I feel you on that. I was just curious more so about like this aspect of it, and then you can like nudge the conversation. But it's just a very weird flow sometimes when somebody's like, I know that, and you're like, I know, I'm getting to the thing, right?
Yeah.
Or right, and it's like, yeah, banter back and forth, keep it casual, because you want that person to freely express themselves. But like also, I would suggest, you know, for everybody, like, and I know it's hard sometimes in the moment because you want to go off and you're excited. But like, and I'm saying this as somebody that's currently taking lessons and I'm in that mindset, like just STFU when you're in the moment and don't go into like excessive tangents because it's easy to be like, oh, you listen to that person? Oh, bro, they were my favorite influencer. Like, they're trying to explain mixing to you, and you're like, oh yeah, so I took this track that I referenced with, and then I tried this new mixing thing that I did, and like I watched this YouTube video on mixing, and like they said this thing, so I tried this out here on this, and then they go on this tangent, and you're like. You feel bad because you're like, I don't want to be like, stop, but I want you to get the full value out of this section, and we don't need to be necessarily talking about YouTube videos. And that's where like the empathy kicks in because I'm like, I know they're excited. They're trying to explain the rationale of why they did a certain thing or whatever, but you know, like just don't get too caught up in having to explain yourself. It doesn't really matter like what the person thinks of you or where they think you're at or whatever. Just recognize that like I just paid some money for this session and this person is willing to sit down and mentally dump all of their knowledge on me. Let them just fucking go off for the whole hour. Like knock yourself out, have fun. Tell me anything that comes across your mind. And I would say that for anybody taking a lesson with me or when I'm taking lessons, man, just like that's when like all the shit just clicks. I feel anyway from both sides of that. Yeah.
Amen. Purely from a getting the most out of it perspective, whether it's making music with someone or taking a lesson with someone, trying to insert preconceived I've done this, or I know this, or I want to sound like this, or we should do it like this, is the quickest way to kind of interrupt the flow of what otherwise could have been a really magical end of the rainbow. If you just cut the rainbow off right at the start, you don't see the pot of gold. It's like, I mean, it happens all the time. It's the natural inclination to bring these preconceived notions or questions, or I've done it like this, or but it's definitely let it flow.
Yeah.
Don't direct it too much.
One thing too that I find helpful, or at least what I do in sessions, before I bring something up, if it's like something like related, I'll just be like, hey, by the way, let me know if I'm getting ahead of myself here, but I was just curious about XYZ, and then let them go off. And sometimes it's just a matter of like, oh yeah, I'm just explaining this and then we'll get to that. Or it's like, oh, you know what? Actually, I wouldn't focus on that so much because I found it more beneficial to think of it this way or whatever. And you can sort of throw input in to stimulate conversation, but like, you don't have to talk about all of the things, and you don't have to like force the conversation or prove yourself. Just let the conversation happen as it may, and all of those naturally connected ideas will fall into place. And I know somebody here said, you know, you don't even know what you don't know. And that's, you know, a huge part of it. They're going to mention that one thing where you're like, oh, fucking yeah, of course.
Yeah, shouts out to Shadow Star for dropping the phrase that sums it all up. White belt mentality.
Yeah.
Have that white belt mentality, that beginner mind, you know, not coming in like, oh, I know all this stuff. I'm the shit. Like, I mean, you showed up for the lesson because you look up to this person's knowledge. Not to say that you don't know some things they don't know, or they only know shit you don't know, or whatever, but like, just allow
Yes,
the
exactly.
conversation to take place. And, you know, like Tesco said, you can nudge it in the way you were hoping for, but don't interrupt and break their flow state so much. I want to talk about some of the things that I have in the sessions that I have with ninjas. Anybody who's had a session with me will recognize these couple of things. two things I really like to hammer home. One really ties into what we were talking about with mastering is draft mentality. Everybody comes in as a yellow belt, orange belt, like, Luke, I feel like I'm not finishing enough songs, man. Like I got to be finishing more songs. I'm like, oh, interesting. What's a finished song? And they don't have an answer. Because that is a nebulous, hard concept. The whole point, like, finished song is brown belt level. Being able to consistently finish songs is black belt level. Why are you, as a yellow belt, holding yourself to black belt standards? That is a recipe for unhappiness and unproductivity. So instead, I really hammer home, like Rip Kenny said, okay, I finish the mix and I print it. And then I wait a couple days and I come back and I listen to it and I make more changes and I print it again. That is drafting. Forget finishing songs. Only focus on finishing drafts. Do the best version you can with the time allotted to you and the skills you currently have today, and print it and send it to track feedback. Or if you don't have track feedback yet, hint, hint, get it. But if you aren't gonna yet, just wait. Work on something else. Watch some weekly downloads. Learn some shit. Come back with fresh ears and a little bit more knowledge and make a list of things you think you should change about the track and make it a little bit better and print it again and wait again and work on some other shit and learn some shit and keep this process going. The best way to kill a track and your confidence in yourself at the same time is to only focus on one track for long periods of time and do nothing else. Because back to, you don't know what you don't know. There are things that you don't know are screwing this track up right now. If you knew everything on how to finish this track already, it would already be done. And there wouldn't be anything else to fix about it. But that's not where you're at. Shit, that's not where I'm at. So slow down. Just do the best job you can today and wait, move on. Draft mentality. The other thing that's been really big is focusing on SMART goals, which is a concept. I've seen the acronym stand for different things, but I have a specific version of the acronym for SMART that I think is the most helpful. S, specific. Make sure your goals are specific. M, measurable. You have to be able to measure whether or not you completed this goal. A, there's a lot of different A's. I go for action oriented. It has to be something you specifically can actually do to check off whether you did it, and measurable, right? R, realistic. Not like having a music career isn't realistic. Like, can you reverse engineer the steps it takes to get there? If you can say, oh, I need to do A, B, C, D, and then I have completed this task, it is a realistic goal. And then T, time bound. Give yourself a deadline or a schedule or a regular rate at which this goal will happen. So saying, I want to get better at producing hits specifically 0 of those 5 things. It is not specific. What does get better at mean? How can you measure that? You can't. What's the action there? That is the result of other actions. You know, it is not realistic because you can't reverse engineer it, and there's no timeline in that sentence. Whereas I'm going to do one arrangement exercise every week for the next 3 months. It hits all 5 of those. It is an action that you're doing, a very specific action that you can measure whether or not you did that arrangement exercise. Realistic, well, what are the steps to get there? Pick a song, figure out the tempo, bring it in the DAW, map every single element, fill those elements with your own thing, print it. Done with the arrangement exercise, you know? And then time bound per week. Things like per day, per week, by Friday, whatever. Just make sure you give yourself a deadline or else you won't do it. You might end up doing it at 4 a.m. on Thursday night to get it done for Friday, but at least you will have that sense of urgency. So those 2 things I have found have been the absolutely most helpful for me in my life and for my students as I've been sharing that a ton. Focus on drafts and set SMART goals using specific, measurable, action-oriented, realistic, time-bound language.
I love how clear and specific that explanation was. You could have explained that to a 5-year-old and they'd be like, yep, crystal clear. Got it.
The beauty of teaching it over and over and over on every session.
Yeah. That was a nice little bow on that one. We got another question from Brandon, the archivist.
Brandon, can you please give us a phonetic spelling?
I need
of
a
your
phonetic
name
on that one,
right at least once on the podcast.
I like the name. I don't know how to say it. Should I create different artist projects for different styles, or just have one artist project that accompanies my desire for variety in style / genre? I was actually ruminating on this recently about how big name artists that I know and love can experiment with different genres, and people are like, oh, cool, I like their take on this genre, while it seems like most people that would have tried to do a bunch of different genres just wouldn't really have caught with anything. And what I kind of in my own head realized is that you have to determine what your artist project is about. And then if you have made a name for yourself in a big level, then it is then cool to hear that person's take on this other thing. But if you're not that person yet, it's not quite as important to that person to hear your take on this thing. That you're, not B level, but like not top level drum and bass experiment. They could go listen to Mefjus or Million Camo and Crooked or Noisia. Like, there's people that make really incredible drum and bass that could go listen to. So for me, like, if you're making, maybe your project is about making party music. Party music comes in many different forms, shapes, and styles. If it accompanies the embodiment of partying and having a good time, that could look a lot of different ways. But if your ethos for your project is like hard-hitting club music or hard-hitting EDM or hard-hitting dubstep, whatever it is, your ethos should be your ethos. Like, let's take Zed's Dead as an example. Like, they rose to popularity mostly making dubstep. In the early days of Zed's Dead, if you're a real head, they made some electro stuff, but that was complimentary of the time for dubstep artists. But really, they made a name for themselves making dubstep music, right? And then as they rose to popularity, then they made a house song that also sounded very much like Zed's Dead. The one that I'm thinking of is Lost You. I'm sure they made a bunch of others. But after they were popular, hearing Zed's Dead do a Zed's Dead style house track was then like, oh, that's really cool. Like, hearing Zed's Dead's take on house music that sounds like them is an interesting offshoot that I can appreciate because I know what they sound like and I know what house music sounds like, but I didn't know what their take on house music would sound like until now. But I feel like regardless, you just have to make sure that you are making a name for yourself with a consistent brand and quality, and then you can derive from there if you make it to that point. All of that to say, yes, you probably should make different artist projects for various different styles if they are not contiguous with one another. But if they all fall under the same umbrella, go for it.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and that's something I have definitely had a journey with. I've been Luke Rain for a very long time. I was a rapper. I happened to make my own beats. I decided to quit rapping and focus way more on beats. Then I decided to get into other genres, and I started making a lot of stuff. Then I grew my hair out and played the first trap beat I had ever made at a beat battle and became Trap Jesus all of a sudden, and let Luke Rain, all my profiles and stuff just languish in the dust. And then I got some advice like, hey, so this is weird. You're playing us music as a person that calls himself Trap Jesus, and it is not trap, and it also has nothing to do with Jesus. We are confused as all hell. This doesn't make any sense. And because of that, I kind of don't like it. Even though it's really good, I like what you're doing, I don't like how you presented it to me because I thought I was getting something else, and now I'm kind of upset at the bait and switch. And this is not just like from Joe Blow on the street who heard my music. This is like big people in the music industry. This is like an A&R at the judges of the beat battle I was at the ASCAP Expo were an A&R at Atlantic, the vice president of urban music at ASCAP, and Amadeus, who is one of the Bad Boy Hitmen, one of the biggest producers for Bad Boy ever. Like, these are real heavy hitters that are giving me this advice. And I'm like, okay, interesting. 2 days later, I'm at Il Gates' house and I play him the same set of music and he gives me the same question. Where's the trap? Where's the Jesus? How am I supposed to put out trap Jesus music if it has neither of those things in it? And it finally hit me like, oh, I guess this music has to be Luke Rain. And I will do my trap Jesus stuff is like when I'm working, making, more like hip hop stuff for artists. And I found the separation. And that has been very helpful to me because now I just can go super weird with anything Luke Rain, as long as it's bassy, dancey, whatever, trippy stuff can go over in Luke Rain, and anything that's a little more mainstream gets to go under Trap Jesus. Caveat, it is exhausting enough building one artist profile successfully. I have yet to build an artist profile successfully. I am exhausted having more than one. Not to mention, shouts out to Rave Gravy that me and Rip Kenny are a part of, and has currently one single out, and you haven't heard from us in a year because we're all busy working on our solo projects. So, very much so. Yes, you can totally have different things and put them out as different things, but it's hard to market music. And so really focus on that and focus on ways to uniquely market each brand. And, that's going to take a lot of time. So you better get good at making quality music quickly so that you have time to learn how to market yourself and find some avenues for income so that you can funnel that into advertising.
Hallelujah, Trap Jesus. Can I get an amen in the chat? Oh, man. I feel like a good parallel to ask yourself is like, I never play World of Warcraft, but I imagine it's the same thing as asking yourself, do I want a level 100 knight or do I want 2 level 50 wizard and a rogue? And it's like, do you value just going further with one character or do you want to try out what both have to offer? And now it's like you can make good connections in the industry through both, but and feed them between each other. But it all depends on what you're trying to get across. Like, I would say pick one thing that you want to do and get good at that, because life is short and the competition is tough and fierce. But, Flume was Flume's side project. I don't know what the name before that was, but Flume as a project took off while he was mainly focused on something else. So it's like you have that example there of the opposite case. So it all depends. But one thing I will say, the way I would think about it, instead of styles of music or genres or whatever being the main differentiator, think about your message, your mood, and your vibe. So your message is, what are you trying to get across to people? Is it party, fun? Is it, praise Jesus? Is it, rave your face off? Heartbreak sucks. What is the message you're trying to get across? Then your, mood and vibe, right? Vibe is where are you going to hear this type of music played out? Is it club vibes? Is it late night drive vibes? Is it sitting by the campfire vibes? What is the context? And then what mood am I in? Is it a sad late night drive? It is a fucking turn up. Is it is it a stare in awe end of the festival 4 a.m. set when it's purely dark and it's ethereal melodic music? Is it rage your face off kind of, while you're grinding your teeth on some stimulants or some shit like that, right? It's who am I making music for? right? And then what mood are they going to be in and where are they going to be? And I find, you know, you could definitely pair up like chill hop and liquid drum and bass and lo-fi and all that stuff if you have like a headphones on late night kind of vibe to your stuff, then everything will still make sense. So I think if you break down your brand into those three things, or like your project or your vision or whatever, and you ask yourself, what am I telling people? What mood are they going to be in when they listen to my music? And what is the vibe? Where are they going to be? That is going to clear up a lot of, does this make sense? Because the truth is, nobody is like, I'm in a, well, maybe, right? But like, it's not even still so much if somebody's like, I'm in a liquid D&B mood, that they absolutely need liquid D&B. It's just like, that mostly gets across of what they're feeling for. So if your artist brand stands for a particular mood or vibe or whatever, when somebody's like, I'm feeling chill and I just want to kick back and smoke a doob and, you know, just get lost in the music. If your stuff fits with that vibe, then you're going to come to mind. Hopefully that clears things up. Associate with times and places and events and emotions, and not with fucking nerdy ass technical producer bullshit like 140 BPM and dubstep and genres and shit like that.
Yeah. Amen. That's good. We got 2 more questions in the chat. Dirt Green asks, do you guys have multiple tracks in the oven at once or one at a time usually? I tend to overwhelm myself with current projects. I'm going to go with multiple always. Like I said earlier, if you only focus on one at a time, you will drive it and yourself into the ground because you probably don't have the skills to finish it anyways. Just throwing that out there, you know? And you need time away from that track to let your ears reset and your emotions reset. Because if you come back to the track and it's not giving you any of the emotions you thought it had yesterday, that tells you a lot. But if you take 3 days away from the song and it hits you, boom, right in the chest, like, oh yeah, that's what I was feeling, then you're doing a good job and you conveyed it and you keep working on it. So definitely, I like to have multiple at a time. I know you can overwhelm yourself with current projects, but you know, pick a handful to round robin on at a time. And if any of them you hit a wall where you feel like I just have no idea how to finish that song, take it out of rotation for a while. Go learn other shit for a hot ass minute and don't mess with this song for a while, all right? And just move on. I'm redoing tracks right now that I wrote in 2018. Thank God I didn't keep working on them then, because I could have spent thousands of hours to get a pile of crap. Or I come back to it and spend a handful of hours with my 2021 skills and ears and tools that I've amassed in the past 3 years. I wasn't even using a mixing template back then. First step, just let me drop this into the mixing template and go through my new process. Oh, wow, that fixed 90% of the issues with that song.
Yeah,
so
100%. I'm a fan of the batch as well. I normally have kind of like a priority list, though. If I have something that I feel like is A level that I want to come out in the next few months, or like the next track that I want to release, it'll be my number one priority. If I hit a wall on that one or I get frustrated by it, normally I'll take a little break from it, work on finishing something else. But I think that kind of speaks to the importance of using a whole daytime session to write that track, because then you're not coming back to it. Like I would say that rarely nowadays I get to the point of frustration with a track because of the, you know, time that I put in to build the skills to be able to put a full track onto paper in one day. And then I'm no longer rewriting that arpeggio in the background and beating my head against the wall and feeling like I'm stuck, because the bones are there and now it's just mixing or figuring out these little things. And if you're in momentum with the track, just like take that one until you're not anymore and then work on the next one. But for me, yeah, I totally agree. Have a batch of tracks that you're working on. Take one as far as you can. If you feel like you hit a roadblock, give it a couple days, work on something else, and then come back to it. Normally those fresh ears will really serve you well.
Yeah, print it and listen to it somewhere else with a different system, different environment. You know, whether that's in your car or in your earbuds or whatever, a different room of your house. You know, like even even just listening on the exact same speakers in the exact position, but from iTunes instead of from your DAW makes a difference, because you can't immediately make tweaks. You have to listen to it differently. And then you have to write shit down that you hear. Like all of that distance from the DAW is helpful.
Yeah, 100%. Even if it's just like the car test for anyone, including myself, is hugely important. If I'm working on a song and I get it to a point where I'm like, I think this is good, I'll just go take a loop around the neighborhood and listen to, you know, maybe 2 other tracks before that one, and then listen to it and be like, oh, okay. Like empirically against my references in my car that I know really well, this is still wrong. This is still wrong. And having that break for your ears and a different listening environment will highlight a lot of stuff that you could have been that could have already been good, and you would have spent a lot of time, you know, chasing your tail for no reason, or you find the stuff that you do need to fix that you hadn't thought of before, and it just makes the process much quicker. Definitely listen on a bunch of different systems when you're in that home stretch. Hugely important. And say you're finishing 4 tracks for an EP, like get them all to like pretty good, and then bounce and listen, go on a 20-minute drive and listen to all 4, make notes for all of them, come back and keep working on them. That in that context, when you're working on multiple tracks at a time, it's really easy to finish them in that setup where you're listening on much different systems, coming back to it and rotating through fixing the problems on each one.
Yeah. And just like focusing on drafts instead of finished songs, when you're finishing an EP, focus on the tracks more than the EP. I've definitely made that mistake before where I'm so focused on the EP's got to be these 4 songs. I don't realize down the line that some of those songs are kind of unworkable and unfinishable for various reasons. And I get so granular and think, oh no, it's got to be this EP and this EP. And I ignore all these other songs that are objectively better tracks. And they come back to it like, oh yeah, no wonder this EP got rejected. It's just clearly not as good as some of these other songs I've been working on that I ignored because I didn't think they were part of the EP.
Yeah.
Get in your songs and see which of them make a group.
100%. And when you're finishing that EP, at least for example, for my Dojo EP, like I thought I had 4 songs, only one of those ended up being on the EP. If you spend those 8 hours trying to rewrite that bass line in the song that you think is going to be the one, and it's still not, because rewriting the bass line is usually not going to make your average song incredible. Spend that day to write a different song, and maybe that one is then the one. And that's what I found. If in that sense, at least, like exactly what you were saying, like sometimes spending all the time in the world trying to polish a turd isn't going to make it any shinier. Just write something else that's, you know, less of a turd.
You just got a shitty rag now.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And you wasted polish.
Man, yeah, I'm just quickly going to echo that because I think you guys nailed it. Keep a few in the vault. I only want to hear your best shit. You only want to hear my best shit. So keep 3, 4, 5 around. And anytime you notice something newer you wrote is, you know, deserves to be in that top 5, consider getting rid of one. I'm not saying you have to. I'm just saying, you know, keep the cream of the crop around and keep your focus on those. And it's through quantity that not only will you reach quality, but you'll be able to recognize quality. If you just have one idea and you're putting all your eggs in one basket, you're going to be so in love with that idea and mentally masturbate over it, just like me and Luke did for our EPs, and probably Evan, you did too, because I've scrapped my EP so many times, and it just comes from that over creative ADD part of your mind where you're just like in this fantasy land. So keep the best around and focus on finishing them. And, you know, you can do those like chiseling or like shaving sessions, like shaving the mixes like Luke talked about earlier. Like you could go through each of those tracks in one session and just touch them up over the course of like a week or so, and you'll get a really good result that way.
Amen. Which brings us to our final question. How do you fight, is from Nomadic, how do you fight through creative/writer's block? Sometimes I'm sitting there at a blank template for far too long thinking, I've been taught like a dozen ways to write a song, yet I just can't get anything down. Are there any tricks or techniques you fall back on that always get you back on track?
That is the golden question.
Yes. Very important question. As Evan will probably attest, who's been in sessions with me, I no longer really have that problem. I used to, for sure, would sit staring at a blank DAW. I think one of the big things is trusting your instincts. Like, you make music for a reason. It's because you have musical ideas. Take one and run with it. If nothing else, like, if you've got a lot of musical ideas and you want to take some time to figure out which one really hits you, awesome. If you have no musical ideas but have blocked out time to be in the DAW, for the love of God, just run with anything. Just start putting shit in. It doesn't matter if it's good. Sometimes the seventh thing you put in the DAW will clearly be the best one, and you'll mute the other 6 tracks and start writing around that one. That happened to me last night. I was using Arcade, and I found this little key loop, and I was like, oh, this is kind of cool, and oh, I'll chop it like this, and then I'll reverse it like that, and then, oh, I'll make this bass line, and I'll put these drums on it, and I'll do this, and then I was like, oh, you know what? I hate that key loop. Now that I'm soloing it and listening to it and trying to EQ it, I really don't like how it sounds. And tell you what, the bass line doesn't actually work that well with it. And when I soloed the bass line, I don't love it either. These drums are all right. What else can I put on top of the drums? And I found like a different loop in a different pack. And I started chopping that loop, and I really like that loop. And then I grabbed the same bass synth and I changed the patch and I wrote a new bass line to fit that loop. And I really like that. And now I think I'm actually going to go out and delete the drums tonight and get rid of those drums and make better drums that actually fit that. But if I had just sat there thinking, oh, is this a perfect loop? I wouldn't have gone anywhere. I will have deleted every element that song started with, but I will have gotten somewhere. And that's what I want to nail home. Like, fuck writer's block. This is just you questioning yourself too much before you move. After you've done the work, it's healthy to question. Is that dope? Do I want to put that out to the world? Does it need more work? Do I need to delete that part? Great questions after you've bothered putting something down. Before you bother putting something down, just for the love of God, get anything down.
Yeah, 100%. To just add on to that, the cure for writer's block is to keep coming up with ideas. I can't tell you how many times I've set aside a day to work on music, and I came up with one dope idea, like maybe chords or like a guitar riff or something, and I'm working on it. You know, I started at 8 a.m. and it's 5 p.m., maybe even 10 p.m. And I'm like, I still don't have a song because I'm trying to focus on this one part where I've been listening to this loop, trying to figure out what to add or what to make the drop, and just feeling like I'm stuck. But it's only because I stopped generating new ideas and started judging the ideas that were already there and trying to make the ideas that were already there into a song. The surefire cure for writer's block is to just turn stuff off and write more things. Duplicate it, write a new melody with the same patch. Delete both of those, come up with a new sound, turn off the bass line, make a new bass line. That still doesn't work. Okay, we're not going to work on the bass line anymore. Let's write some different chords. Okay, those aren't good either. Let me actually pick up. I've been staring at the computer for too long. This isn't working. Let me pick up the guitar and just write something that comes into my head based on the drums that I have. And just like last week, I was working on a song, and I had parts that I loved, and then I couldn't figure out what the drop wanted to do because I had these preconceived notions of what it should do. And instead, I just picked up my guitar and started noodling on what would sound good with the one thing that I knew I liked. And then that guitar thing, I tried to shoehorn into all the other parts, and it still didn't work. And I kept beating my head against the wall, and it was like midnight. And I set aside this whole day to write music. That day doesn't end until the next day in the morning at 8 a.m. or whatever. So I was like, I got to keep working on this. I can't tell you how many times that I have been at a point in which I'm like, I think I'm just going to quit. I don't think this song's going to happen. I think I'm just going to go to bed. just like, I set aside this day to write music, but I just don't think I have it, whatever. And then you just keep pushing. You just keep, let's try this a different way. Let's try this a different way. Let's try this a different way. And eventually you'll land on that thing. And then, like Luke said, you mute some other parts and you realize this is actually the thing. And you build from there. That guitar part that I wrote just noodling, I realized was only inhibited by the other ideas that I was trying to shoehorn with it. And that guitar part was actually, oh, damn, this works really well by itself. Let's make this the thing and then build some layers to make that even more of the thing. And then you end up with a song that you actually liked. But it's all about just continuing to try different combinations of things, taking stuff out, adding this thing, taking that out, adding this thing, taking that out. These two things I already did. Do they work together? But you just got to keep trying different stuff. And don't quit on yourself. Like I said, there have been like half the songs that I love now had some moment within that writing session where I was like, this song is not going to happen. I'm not feeling it. I'm just not into it. I think I suck ass today. I'm making a turd. I don't think it's going to happen. And then you just keep pushing through it. And then I'm like, at the end of the night, like, oh my God, I'm so glad I didn't quit on this, because there was something beautiful in here that I could have just left on the table. And now I'm so happy that I pushed through it and got to the end and finished this thing. So exactly like Luke said, just keep trying different stuff. The ideas might be in there. They might not be in there already, but you'll never get to it by listening to that loop and trying to judge what's there and think your way into a great song. Just got to try more stuff.
Amen. You got anything, Tesco? There's also some good answers in the chat I want to get to and shout out.
Man, yeah, I was just going to say, very simple, but Mr. Bill said something like a few years ago on one of his videos that stuck out with me, where he was taking in, I think, viewer questions, and someone's like, do you ever get writer's block? And I don't know why, in the simple ass way that he said it, it really stuck with me. But he's like, no, I don't, because music's just work, right? It's not going to write itself. And I was like, God damn it, you're right, it's not going to write itself. And he talked a bit about how he just sees it as like a reaction-based process where like he just generates stuff and then edits it afterwards and lets chance and randomness and that stuff generate cool stuff that he then picks out of and then just sequences and arranges. And I really like that approach, because I agree that it's a very reaction-based activity where you do a move, you listen to it back, and then based off of that, you do more stuff. So your biggest mistake really that you're doing here is just sitting and doubting and letting the mental chat take over, when in reality, it's not going to use the result. It's all about literally just twisting anything. At least that'll give you the feedback of that was better or that was worse, and then you can go off of that. And somebody else said, I'm going to give him a proper shout out. John Hello Ego said, write something that sucks. Yeah, like if you're having trouble writing a song, just write, like, make a beat for like fucking Cardi B. That's going to be like the next WAP or something. Or like just do something like remix the SpongeBob. I know, but like that's like the meme song, right? Like just go full no fucks with it. Or like make the SpongeBob theme song slap. Or yeah. Or like remix Star Spangled Banner immediately. Man, just go in and have some fun and make it your goal to write the most giant steaming piece of shit you can absolutely write. And to wrap that up, I would say that's useful for life in general. Like, not to get all preachy and hashtag woke, hashtag deep, but like if you're being pushed in one direction, if the river's flowing the other way, don't swim against the current. Like, maybe it's not where you want to go exactly, but like that's the path of least resistance. Everything in nature follows the path of least resistance. If you're naturally being pushed towards this one way, just flow with that.
Hashtag facts, hashtag enlightenment.
Hashtag
I have one thing.
Go for it. Well, let me give this one,
Yeah,
and then I'll pass it to you.
Cool.
It was short. You mentioned something, Evan, about like wondering what you should do, and I think the words "should" and "supposed to" are toxic. Not just in the studio, but in general. What should I do? What am I supposed to do? You're creating an imaginary character that's sitting outside of you, judging your progress. Fuck that guy. He doesn't even exist.
or girl or person.
The one for me is a dude. He's a dick. Ladies are sweet. What are you gonna do?
Tiny Rick.
So basically, don't worry about what you should do, what you're supposed to do. Go with the flow. Like I've been in sessions where it's like, oh, what do you want to do? I don't know. Let's make some like 140 trap shit, and then we start going and like, ooh, actually, this melody is like more of a house jam. Oh, I thought we were supposed to be doing that over there. Yeah, but listen to this house bass line. This shit slaps. How can it not be a house? We're clearly making a house song now.
Yes.
Like, okay, you're right. That is a dope house bass. So what's up, Evan?
Yeah, no, 100%. And that also ties back into the question about like a lesson with someone. Like if you're getting nuggets from this one aspect of this conversation and you want to ask about multi-band like maybe it makes more sense to dive further into this vein of gold that you're hitting. You got to go with the flow. You can't force your ideas onto the thing. You gotta go with it. I love that. What I wanted to touch on real quick was essentially, oh my God, what was the thing I wanted to talk about? Oh no, did I forget it? In a
second, I'm going to shout out a couple of the people who are in the chat giving really good ideas. So I want to preface this as...
Oh, I remembered. Sorry.
Hey, all right, good.
Hey, going back to the original question, you've been staring at a blank template and you can't get anything out. One of the things that is like the easiest way to break out of blank template paralysis, open up a finished song before you printed it that you like. Use all of those parts that you like to start generating a new song. And then every time you're not going to end up with the same song that you started with. Like you're going to have this one bass sound that already sounded cool. That's going to then generate this idea for this other thing. And then you're going to change that patch a little bit. And it's just easier to start from a place of a bunch of things that you like that are going to help infuse that excitement and help you get into the flow of things. And then 10 times out of 10, unless you're trying to make the same song, you're not going to make the same song. And it was just a really good way for you to start from a place of things that you liked and reimagine them in a different way, and you'll end up with a different song. So if you're having especially trouble with a blank template, try that. That'll help.
And so to like close this out, Gus Class dropped in that arrangement exercises really helped him escape writer's block. And Chef Womp said timer beats broke him out. And those are both really good things that have also really helped me. But I just want to throw out, since we're on Dojo TV and we're talking to Dojo Ninjas here, focus on what is at your belt level. If you're a yellow or an orange belt, right now, focus on arrangement exercises, because that's what the dojo is asking you to focus on. It's really important to know how arrangements work before you move on to, say, the recipes in the EDM cookbook, because these recipes it's going to give you the step-by-step to get that first build up and drop. But in order to make the whole rest of the song, you kind of have to know how an arrangement works, and you have to have practice making working arrangements before you can turn what the recipe gives you into the full song. So there's a reason we structure it that way. And then there's timer beats come after that, because it's really hard to make a beat really fast unless you know how to work these recipes well and quickly. Just telling yourself like, oh, I'm going to do a timer beat in the next 45 minutes is great if you know how to do recipes and you have a palette of sounds on hand. If you don't have any of that preparation, it's going to be really tough. So yes, all of these three things are huge and have been a big part of why I no longer really experience writer's block. But focus on the level you're at. Don't jump to timer beats if you haven't figured out how to do an arrangement exercise. Do an arrangement exercise. You get to take your time. You know, you don't have to worry about the clock. You just have, what is the kick doing? Now, what's the snare doing? And just go step by step through the song. But focus on where you're at, and it will help you move forward. And then one other thing that I want to say to close this out is this quote that I read in the awesome book called The War of Art. And it's a quote from some author, and he was asked in an interview, do you write on schedule or only when you're inspired? And he said, oh, only when I'm inspired. Lucky for me, that's every day at 9 a.m. Let that sink in a little bit. Mm-hmm. If you show up all of the time and just make the music that is there in front of you to make, follow the happy accidents and the coincidences and the synchronicities of the process and react to it, like Tesco's saying, you know, like if you just show up and do that all the time, it just becomes what you do. It's not this fish out of water moment where you're like, no, I'm supposed to make this whole amazing song. It's just like, well, I show up and I make noise happen in a DAW, and sometimes it's better than others. But every time you get to make noise come out, you know, and the first day you showed up in the DAW, you had a skill level between here and here. No noise happens, some noise happens. A week later, you're at, oh, I can always make some noise, and sometimes it's kind of coherent. Well, now I can always make it coherent next month, but sometimes it's like a decent idea. Okay, I can always make a decent idea, but sometimes it's like a song, even if it's a bad song. I can always make a bad song, but sometimes it's an okay song. You know, like your floor and your ceiling will keep rising the more you just show up and show up and show up, and trust that.
Amen. And let it be known that we write steaming piles of doo-doo all the time, and the only thing that keeps me going and pushing through is listening to my idols talk about how they write steaming doo-doo all the time. So like, yeah, it's definitely, while we can all finish songs, it's like still that rare session every once in a while that really blows you away, that makes everything worth it. But we're still pushing through shit, to put it lightly. You know, like I'm a decade deep into this. These guys are like around there too, if not more than me. It's like we still write crap all the time. It's just like it's slightly better crap than it was last year, and the good stuff is slightly better than the good stuff last year.
Yeah.
I've got songs I would reject now that 2 years ago I would have been ecstatic to make. Mm-hmm. That is a good feeling. Being able to cut those ones. Yo, John dropped a Stephen King quote. Amateurs sit and wait for inspiration. The rest of us just get up and go to work. Amen. That's what's up. Like, show up. That's the difference between an amateur and a professional. Some people are like, well, amateur does it for the love, and that's good. You want to do this for the love, but professional does it for the money. No, a professional tells the world this is what they do. That's what it means to profess, to tell the world. They tell the world this is what they do, and then they do it all the time. An amateur is like a hobbyist. Well, I love this. It's not really what I do. I'll show up when I can, when it feels good, when it's easy. That's no way to build a career.
Amen.
100%.
Amen. Can I get an amen in the chat?
Amen.
Well said.
All right, humans and also ninjas. You guys have been wonderful. Thanks for the great questions. As always, it's been super fun hanging out with y'all in the Discord chat. Anybody listening to this in the future times who is not a member of Dojo TV, which is free, by the way, and is not in this chat, ask yourself, why the hell not? There will definitely be a link somewhere right down there that tells you how to get there for free. And, join the party, y'all. Thanks to everybody who had questions, everybody who had comments, and especially everybody who dropped funny gifts that made us laugh while we were talking to you.
Yeah, it's been awesome kicking it with everybody here. For real, like, I'm sure I can speak for everybody here. Like, these sessions are a lot of fun, and just being able to get together and, help you overcome those roadblocks that we've been through and kind of just demystify some stuff, I feel like that's really what it's all about. We're all imperfect and just trying to express ourselves, and we're united by this love for nerdy production stuff, and we like cool noises put together. So, it wouldn't be possible without everybody here, and I'm glad y'all are enjoying it. If you want to support us and go favorite it on Spotify or Apple Music, we just dropped an episode today while filming this one. So we would greatly appreciate that. I know everybody knows algorithm, yada, yada. But yeah, smash that subscribe. Yo, if you want to share it with one person too, that'd be fucking lit.
Oh.
You would get a piece of our heart forever.
Super lit.
But yeah, honestly though, thank y'all for coming, and we love each and every one of you. Thanks for participating and, kicking it with us. It's been a good time.
Appreciate you guys. Thanks for tuning in. Fun as always. And it's like we like to say around here, peace out and peace among worlds.
I'm not sorry.
I like it.
All right, humans, what a good episode. As Rip Kenny would say, big up chat. Thank y'all for your amazing questions. Again, if you want to get in on those questions, I want you to hop on down to Dojo TV, link down below, sign up for free, and get in our Discord chat. It is the best place to meet people and to get a lot of questions answered, and it is a great way to get introduced to the Producer Dojo community. Please subscribe, like, share, comment, all those good things. Please let us know how we're doing. Please let people know about us. We are here for you. Ask questions in the comments. Please, we will answer them live on the air and give you a shout out. Now, let's make sure we support those sponsors. If you're not in it already, go get that Dojo Max membership where you can get monthly private lessons, unlimited track feedback, and the weekly download archive. It's the best value Producer Dojo has to offer. Guest practices where you can learn from Seth Drake at the Approach Institute, the best engineer we know, and your first class is free. Finally, Gvngaroo Records music distribution where you can get unlimited music uploads for under $10. Distribute your tunes to all the goons. Get your tracks at every major platform and pay way less to do it. All right, y'all. Till next time, peace and peace among worlds.